Welcome to Reality Bytes Radio on the 7th of March 2021, and regular listeners to this broadcast will know that that's not our regular intro tune, and many listeners will also recognise that it's the intro tune for Alan Watts' cuttingthroughthematrix.com and his normal Sunday broadcast, and the tune of course is Jerry Rafferty and Baker Street. I don't know what Alan's association with that tune was at all, but he played it at the beginning and the end of each show, so I just thought I'd put it on today because of Alan's sad passing on Thursday, the 4th of March. I got a call on Friday from somebody close to Alan who's known him for a number of years to give me the news. I'm not going to go into any details of what happened to him or anything like that. That's a private thing. But yeah, Alan Watts died on Thursday, March 4th, and he will be sadly missed by many, many people, and in fact already is missed by many people who knew of his passing. But what can you say about the man? I possibly started first listening to Alan maybe 15, 16 years ago. And I came across our first radio interview together. And it was back in 2011. So 10 years ago, as far as I'm aware, was the first one that we did. And I think we did another 24, 25 after that. Not many over 10 years, but still. There were some gaps in between where I didn't do radio at all, so possibly could have done more. But they are what they are, and I have to say that Alan, maybe purely because he was Scottish as well, inspired me, if that's the right word to use, to actually take up radio myself. And I can remember the first time, not particularly what we talked about, but I can remember the first time speaking to Alan and being really, really nervous because I thought this man knows so much stuff and I'm going to screw this up. But we didn't screw it up. We seemed to, I don't know, just hit it off together, and the conversations tended to flow more or less by themselves, with Alan's depth of knowledge just being so incredible that it didn't really matter what I said. And I'd said many times, nobody was on here to listen to me. They were on to listen to him. But it wouldn't matter what question you asked him or what point you made. Alan would always have an answer for it. His depth of knowledge was so profound, so precise on a wide range of topics. You could talk to him about anything at all, really. But as I got to know him better, and we had some private telephone calls, etc., which again could have made great radio shows in and of themselves. But other people would remark that, "Oh, Alan, you never give us any good news. You're all doom and gloom." Well, Alan gave his views as he saw them, and I don't think the subjects that we talk about, there's really any leeway for masking, if we want to use that term, masking the depths of horror that we're evidently going into now, which Alan has been talking about for many, many years. And I agree wholeheartedly with him on that point. I don't think there's any point dressing it up at all in any way, shape or form. But he did have a sense of humour, of course, and that came across in some of his own talks as well, and the conversations we had off air, telephone conversations or whatever. He had a sense of humour. What can you say? What can you say? He had been on a number of radio shows over many, many years, but he hadn't really done an awful lot. And we were very, very fortunate that he agreed to come on. At one point, it was every month. And he never he never shied away from doing a broadcast. He was always make himself available. And at times we had technical problems, and he would sort them out for us in the background because we couldn't manage to do it ourselves because we didn't actually know what was going on. But I think our last talk together was September 30th last year, and due to my work situation, I couldn't do radio for a few months. But we had planned to have a chat fairly soon and organise another broadcast, but sadly that can't happen. So I'm sure people, if they're in the chat box, will have something to say about Alan and have their own views, and it'd be interesting to hear them or see them. I'm not looking at the chat box at the moment, but my wife is. But again, Alan's. I don't think there's anyone in what can loosely be called a truth movement. I don't think anyone has Alan's depth of knowledge and or commitment to what he was doing. So it's as I say, it's a sad day. I never thought for a second I would have to do an announcement like this on radio. It's not something that even entered my mind. But what can you say? A gentleman. I never heard him actually get angry on air. Maybe, I think back in the day when he used to take calls, there were some people who came on that were just there to cause trouble, and he got them off the line pretty quickly, and I think that was right as well. And then he just went on to doing his own broadcast without the phone-ins and stuff, which ended up being the ones he's doing now, over 4 hours long every week. And I personally know the effort that takes, because to do 2 hours a week is bad enough, but to do, I think his last talk was over 4.5 hours. And Alan, unlike myself, as I've mentioned many times, I don't read the full articles. I generally read the headline and maybe the first paragraph or something. But Alan would meticulously read everything. And if you just imagine the amount of links that he puts into his every show that he does, that he did, the amount of reading involved, and the articles he obviously read which weren't posted, which he didn't use in his shows. There's all that stuff, all the books to read, the many years of life it takes to garner that knowledge, and to give it away for nothing. Unlike many of the, shall we call them, stars of the so-called truth movement, who have $1 million studios and things like that. That doesn't come about by accident. And I think if there was ever a better use of the word philanthropist, you could give it to Alan Watt for the amount of free information he gave out over many years. A true servant of humanity and the world. And I hope one day he's thanked for it and remembered for it. Certainly be remembered amongst people who listened to him for a number of years. But I hope someday, if we get through this current nonsense that's going on, get through it one way or another, and hopefully come out the other side better, if we can stop it. But I hope Alan will be remembered as somebody very important who helped to bring that about. Because if we get through this and things do go our way, which I'm not very hopeful of, but you never know. If they do go our way, then I think Alan Watt will have been a huge part of that process. And I think his talks, old and new, will still be relevant, regardless of what happens. And I think there's things in those talks going back years and years where he's talked about this day coming, where the vaccine passports, all the rest of it, the genetically modified vaccines, all of it was spoken about many years ago. And he was certainly no conspiracy theorist. Anybody can throw that label about, but Alan wasn't somebody who said things without evidence. And I try to do the same myself, because that's all you can do. If you got the actual documents in front of you and somebody calls you a conspiracy theorist, well, you know where they're coming from. And Alan certainly made a point of using the enemy's own words to hang themselves with. I think we need some rope at the moment for them to hang themselves with, but that's another issue. So, Alan Watt, again, he will be sadly missed by many, many people, and I'm sure there's people listening to this who can't quite believe he's gone. But unfortunately he has, and we'll just have to take his work and keep pushing it out there if we can. And I know there's going to be some kind of notice put on his websites. They're still going to be kept going. All that material will still be there for people to look at, and from what I understand, it's going to be updated every week or so by people behind the scenes who are going to look after that. So, and there will possibly be new material going up, which Alan was in the process of completing, which I've been told will be completed wherever possible, I suppose. Maybe some of it can't be, but who knows? We shall see what turns up. So I think that's all I've got to say on Alan. We're going to have Anne McCloskey, Dr. Anne McCloskey, on later for an hour or so. And at the end, I'm going to play something by Alan, which was his last piece of music he composed just at Christmas there, and a few words from him about his guitar, because there was another side of Alan, of course, and that was that he was a musician. And if anybody's listened to Alan over the years, he used to do a composition every Christmas. But as he mentioned in the clip, just Christmas past in 2020, his arthritis and basically the lack of time due to his continual work getting the truth out to people took its toll, and he didn't pick the guitar up, I think he said 8 years or so. But he did something this year, and we're going to play that right at the end of today's broadcast. And worth listening to, just as a reminder that there was another side to Alan. It wasn't all doom and gloom as people accused him of. There was certainly a sense of humour and a great musician, a great guitar player. So I would encourage you to stay on and listen to that at the end. It's quite long, but well worth listening to. So with that, I think we will go to a little tune just to break up this segment. People who want to just take this section and put it somewhere as a section on Alan Watt or whatever, they can do that. They can cut it. So we'll go to a piece of music, and then we'll come back and do some articles as per usual. Welcome back to Reality at Bytes on the 7th of March 2021. Something Alan was always reiterating, particularly recently, is that if somehow we can get through this on the right side, that people need to go to prison. Lots of people need to go to prison. So maybe I'll have to build a few for them. Or just get some of the innocent people out of prison and put them inside instead. But here's a case in Ireland, and I hope this goes well, and I hope it opens the door to other claims all around the world. And this is actually reported in the mainstream media, so you never know. This is the independent.ie. Dozens of families take legal action against multiple nursing homes in wrongful death claims. And this was just yesterday, March 6th. Up to 40 families are to take legal actions against numerous nursing homes across Ireland for negligence and breach of statutory duty, they say led to the deaths of residents. Solicitor firm PA Duffy confirmed to Independent.ie that it has been instructed in cases against public and private nursing homes. Up to 15 nursing homes, both public and private, will see legal actions taken against them. PA Duffy has also said it believes a commission of investigation will be needed to investigate the failures within nursing homes. More than half of all deaths from COVID-19 in Ireland occurred in nursing homes, Now, they're spinning this here, of course, because it wasn't a failure of the nursing homes. It was a failure of the hospitals who sent sick people into nursing homes to spread the flu, basically. And that is what led to the deaths of a lot of people. It was nothing to do with the staff in the nursing homes. Enda McGarity of PA Duffy said the firm believes an inquiry by the Human Rights and Equality Commission is necessary. Mr. Garrity said this investigation should also address the broader systematic failure of the government to implement policies which would protect its most vulnerable citizens. Well, actually, it murdered them, didn't it? So that's really where the court case should go, is right to the heart of government and arrest all those people involved in the scam in the first place. Our instructions are to issue wrongful death claims against various homes who, we say, have caused or contributed to the deaths of residents by way of negligence and breach of statutory duty, Mr. McGarity told independent.ie. These cases are at an early stage and many of the families are still grieving. In addition, it is within the power of any minister to propose a commission of investigation into any matter considered to be of significant public concern. Over half the deaths from COVID-19 have been in nursing homes. The matter is, therefore, of overwhelming public concern, and we say that a commission will ultimately be required to properly investigate failures. Well, I would suggest it's of overwhelming public concern that the Irish people are locked in their homes and not allowed to see dying relatives and friends and family. And the fact is, as I just mentioned, the government is clearly to blame for all of that. And that is where legal action needs to be taken. It's happening in Germany, I believe, with this man's name escapes me for the moment. Fulmick, or anyway, doesn't matter. An attorney there, and he is talking about murder. Not just negligence, he's talking about actual murder of people in the nursing home situations there. But he's laying the blame where it should be laid, and that is right at the government's doorstep. And I hope that is a genuine case and it goes forward. And we do start seeing the dominoes start to fall. And I think if Alan's somewhere looking down upon us or from wherever vantage point, he gets some joy out of that, actually seeing some of these people held up for their crimes against humanity. So moving on, the UK, and this is the clown who's in charge of the health service in Britain, Matt Hancock. I don't think you see a bigger buffoon unless you stood next to Boris Johnson. But this guy wouldn't get a job selling newspapers on a street corner. But here he is, a Minister for Health, right? Vaccinated people are still a danger, says Hancock. He issues a warning over the COVID jab. Well, what does he mean by that? They're still a danger. And this is from the Express. Grandparents could be super spreaders of coronavirus once they have been vaccinated, Matt Hancock has warned. Well, that line says it all, doesn't it? Grandparents could be super spreaders of coronavirus once they have been vaccinated, Matt Hancock has warned. So what have they been vaccinated with that they're going to spread? It's pretty obvious, isn't it? The Health Secretary said there is still a real danger of those vaccinated against COVID could spread the virus through the population. He urged the public to continue to abide by social distancing measures. So what is the point of a vaccine? What is the point? It's obviously for something else. While the coronavirus jabs stop the large majority from becoming ill from COVID, no they don't. Even the manufacturers will tell you that's a lie. It is still possible those immunised can carry it and pass it on to others. So it doesn't stop you transmitting it either. So it's not a vaccine, is it? He said the responsibility for the fight back against this disease rests on all of us. This is true when it comes to maintaining the rules and social distancing. Social distancing works by denying the vaccine the social contact it needs to spread. Does that make sense to anybody? Social distancing works by denying the vaccine the social contact it needs to spread. So the vaccine spreads. That's what that sentence says. If you don't social distance, the vaccine will spread. So it's not a vaccine, is it? It's some form of disease. You can't spread a vaccine. Even if you have had the jab, the rules still apply. There's two reasons for this. First, because the protection takes time. Your body's immune system is only fully trained up around 3 weeks after your jab. This guy's not even a doctor. I bet he couldn't even put a band-aid on himself. Second, even if you have the protection yourself, we still don't know whether you can pass coronavirus on to someone else. They don't know much, do they? Mr. Hancock added, ministers were looking at the evidence about transmission very carefully and vowed they would publish information on it as soon as we have it available. Well, that'll be never. His warning came after the latest data indicated 1 in 9 adults across the UK have been given a coronavirus antidote. A coronavirus antidote. I thought they were talking vaccines. A total of 6.6 million have been inoculated, putting Britain on track to give a dose to all of the 13 million most vulnerable by the government's February 15th target date. Obviously, this is an old article, but when was this actually out? This was on the 25th of January. But so what does he want to do, this clown? And this is from theguardian.com. Mandatory COVID jabs for NH staff could be discriminatory, top doctors say. Dr. Habib Naqvi also says the move could widen inequalities and increase workplace bullying. Coronavirus latest updates, you can click on them and get all the fear-mongering you want, or you can just click that button and make that box go away. A mandatory COVID vaccination policy for NHS staff in England could be discriminatory, widen inequalities and increase workplace bullying and harassment, a top doctor has said. And I think this is actually because they get so much pushback from NHS staff not wanting to take this poison that they're having to come out with all these excuses as to why they're not going to make it mandatory. Downing Street is reportedly considering a review of making it mandatory for all health and social care staff in England to have the jab as a way of protecting patients. I thought it was to protect themselves. They just said they don't know if you can spread it, right? Even after the jab. So they want to give them the jab, knowing full well that they don't know if it's still transmissible. Staff, however, say the proposals must be scrutinised under health and safety law. Since when did they care about that? And human rights and legal frameworks, or any of that either. Dr. Habib Naqvi, the director of the NHS's Race and Health Observatory and former deputy director of the NHS Workforce Race Equality Standard, said, so they're making it about race. Over the last 12 months, BME staff within the NHS have already faced a number of challenges, including the lack of PPE, risk assessments of variable quality, and redeployment to frontline COVID-19 wards. Well, the NHS and the government have never done a single risk assessment of any of this stuff, including lockdowns, the effect on mental health, none of it. Masks, they've never done a risk assessment on them either. And yet here they are, the NHS, worried about risk assessments to protect staff all of a sudden after a year. While we recommend health and social care workers take the vaccination to protect themselves, patients and colleagues, we are concerned that a new mandatory policy predominantly impacting frontline BME NHS staff, casual and low-paid female carers could be discriminatory. It could lead to the widening of inequalities and a further increase in workplace bullying and harassment. Well, where's the logic behind that? Just because somebody gets a vaccine and somebody doesn't, they're going to start bullying people and harassing them. Beyond the levels highlighted in the latest NHS Workplace Race Equality Standard annual data report. So that they're trying to make it out that there's going to be racial harassment and bullying, right? With no evidence whatsoever, of course. The government is being urged to carry out equality impact assessments before any decision is made and ensure that frontline staff should not face disciplinary action or additional pressure from management or colleagues if they choose not to take the vaccine for personal or medical reasons. There's both there. I think personal and medical comes into it. The British Medical Association, which represents doctors, and the Royal College of Nursing, the RCN, described the move as unnecessary, given a high uptake among staff. There's your behavioural insights team trying to make people believe that the staff are all rushing away to get it, and said it would have ethical and legal implications. In another effort to turn the tide on low uptake among BAME communities, that's the black and ethnic minorities, 150 councillors joined forces to sign an open letter and release social media videos to encourage people in their communities to take the vaccine. Well, maybe the black and ethnic minority groups actually have a brain. Maybe that's what it is. And they actually know that medical experiments have been done on them in the past, and they're not happy about it being done to them again. They're quite happy to sit back and let the stupid white people take it. And God help them, I tell you. Eventually, it's going to come back to haunt them. All those stupid people, and that's the only way to describe them, who will let somebody they don't know inject something into their arm which they have absolutely no knowledge of whatsoever, and do it to their children as well. As part of the campaign, which has the backing of the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, the Labour leader Keir Starmer, and the Vaccines Minister Nadeem Zahawi, councillors from both the Conservative and Labour Party have signed a letter. It said, "The vaccine is our path back to normality." Well, it isn't, is it? Because they've already said we're not going back to normality. And Hancock has said that social distancing and washing your hands and all that kind of nonsense, masks, will still be the normal. The new normal, I guess, or the abnormal, should I say, the new abnormal. Taking the vaccine will mean we can slowly begin to get our lives back to normal. We understand the fears and the anxieties, but each one of us has the power to protect ourselves and help fight this deadly disease. Well, that's the first bit of truth in this article, isn't it? Each one of us has the power to protect ourselves and help fight this deadly disease. Yeah, by making an informed decision on whether to take this poison or not. It's quite simple. The vaccine is now available, and we urge you all to take it when called to do so. They make it sound like a religion, which I guess it is. Birmingham Labour councillor Paulette Hamilton, who signed the letter, urged those with concerns to seek advice from their GP. Well, the GPs don't know anything. The vaccine not only protects the individual, it protects their families, loved ones, and the wider community. So there you go. If you don't get the vaccine, you're going to go home and kill your children, right? The vaccine is our way collectively as a nation to beat this deadly virus. Do not let misinformation put you or your loved ones at risk, she said. And then, of course, here's the Guardian begging for money, as they always do in their articles. I've read 108 articles in the last year, and I'm not alone, apparently. But they want money. But they're sadly not getting any from me. So the coercive tactics still go on, of course. This isn't going to stop until people stop it. As Alan said, the only thing that allows this to happen is you and I. Well, not you and I listen to this, I'm sure, but the vast majority of people who just comply. And particularly if you want to go to China, you've got to bend over and have a probe stuck up your anus to prove you don't have COVID. Really. Maybe that's a false story. I don't know, but it's Japanese government apparently is calling for it to be abandoned, that policy. But yeah, people will literally bend over and do as they're told if their government says they have to do it. It's quite pathetic, really. It's quite pathetic. I'm sure people's grandfathers, great-grandfathers are turning in their graves after fighting 2 world wars to stop this kind of thing happening in their own country and other countries. They will be turning in their graves, and rightly so. They must be ashamed of their children. They must be ashamed. But this is the independent.co.uk, and when was this? This was just the other day. Sorry. Oh, it doesn't have a date on it. Okay. 9 hours ago, it says here. Okay, declaration to travel. Government reveals new exit permit required to leave England. So you don't only have to get jabbed to come in, you've got to have a permit to leave as well. This is like what used to happen in medieval times. And Edinburgh was one of those old medieval cities. And underneath Edinburgh, there are large catacombs, tunnels, etc., which go from one side of the city to the other, if you can find your way through them. But back in the medieval times, people could not afford to leave the city because they couldn't afford to pay the fee to get back in. But there wasn't, they didn't have the capacity to afford to live in a normal house as they were then. So they lived in the catacombs underneath the city, in these dark, damp places, rat-infested places, which myself and Paula have been to visit. Some of them actually used underneath one of the police stations up there on the high street in Edinburgh as prison cells, funnily enough. But yeah, here we are. A permit required to leave England. Doesn't this sound like the Soviet Union? Doesn't it? Back in the 60s and 70s, you couldn't travel from one district to the other without transport papers. Well, here it is. Here it is, folks. The declaration to travel represents the latest tightening of the most draconian restrictions on movement ever known in peacetime. Well, as Alan's mentioned many, many times before, and I think actually the first song he played at Christmas was called either The War or just War. And he's always said we're in a war. And for generations, nobody actually knew it. And it's very, very true, because people don't know now. So we're not living with the most draconian restrictions on movement ever known in peacetime. We're actually in wartime. And that's why we have these restrictions. Less than 60 hours before an unprecedented exit permit will be required from outbound travellers, the government has revealed details of the new declaration to travel. From Monday, 8th of March, that's tomorrow, anyone who enters a port of departure to travel internationally in England without a completed form will be committing a criminal offence, even if they are legally entitled to travel. How can you commit a criminal offence if you're legally entitled to travel? It's either legal or it's not. Airlines, train operators and ferry companies will be required to check that passengers have a valid reason to travel abroad. At present, all holidays at home or overseas are illegal under the stay-at-home rule. The earliest possible date for going abroad from England for leisure is 17th of May. International travel is allowed only for a limited number of exemptions, including work, urgent family matters and medical treatment. How are you supposed to prove what an urgent family matter is? That's private. That is private information to you and your family. It's nobody's business except yours. The form asks travellers for their personal details, including their address, passport number and destination, and requires them to tick a box to indicate their claimed reason to travel. So see, you're assumed to be a criminal. You're guilty before you've done anything. You've got to prove your innocence. The government says you may carry evidence to support your reason to travel. So now you have to show private documents. Private documents. These could be, if you're going abroad for some kind of medical treatment you can't get at home, you're going to have to show medical documents to goons at the airport or the ferry port, black-clad goons with the brain cells of a brick. The declaration to travel represents the latest tightening of the most draconian restrictions on movement ever known in peacetime. Let's slash that out and just call it wartime, shall we? In January, the Home Secretary warned there are still too many people coming in and out of our country each day. Well, that statement, there are still too many people coming into our country, is something that's been touted for many, many decades, and most of them were illegal. Priti Patel told Parliament that the declaration to travel was a necessary step to protect the public and our world-class vaccination programme. A world-class vaccination programme. It doesn't mean the vaccine's world-class, does it? It just means, well, they're lying, it's not world-class anyway. What is a world-class vaccination programme? I wonder how they define that. But if this really was a necessary step to protect the public from catching some spurious disease they've made up, why was it done a year ago? If that was the real goal, why wasn't it done a year ago? If it was a real pandemic, a real virus going around that was flooring people all over the place, people dropping like flies, everybody would have said, yes, let's stop everything for a few weeks and get this under control. But no. 3 weeks to flatten the curve, and now they're stopping people travelling after a year. Labour has supported government restrictions on movement and has frequently called for tougher controls. That's the Labour Party, right? The Labour Party, who's supposed to support and stand by the common man and his rights. And they want tougher controls than are already in place. They want China, basically. They want to live in China. Although they won't be living in China, of course, because they won't be bending over for an anal swab. But maybe the rest of the people in the UK will just have to do that from now on, if they're stupid enough. The publication of the permit coincided with Cyprus announcing it will be opening its borders to fully vaccinated travellers from May the 1st. Well, I hope those Cypriots who are relying on tourism this year from May 1st have something to say about that, because it's going to put them out of business. But again, not enough people speaking up. But schools as well, and this isn't just happening in Britain. I just happened to pull a few articles up because I wasn't sure how long I was going to talk about Alan. I actually couldn't say any more because, well, doesn't matter. I was getting a bit emotional about it and I didn't want to go on. So schools, the schools have been opened, they've been closed, they've been quarantined, this, that, the next thing. And here's an admission from The Guardian, of all places. School COVID tests. Pupils in England very likely to get false positives. Well, people like myself, Alan, everybody else out there who has a brain, who's been reporting on this stuff for the last year, has said from the very, very start that there were false positives. Basically, I've even said 100% false positives, because you cannot have a positive test for something which can't be found, which had been admitted. And they've also admitted that these tests aren't testing for this thing called COVID either. So I don't see how you could have a positive test for any of it. But anyway, this is The Guardian. Children who test positive on lateral flow tests will have to self-isolate even if later PCR test is negative. And I think I read an article the other day there, last week or the week before, where these lateral flow tests are even less accurate than the PCR test. So you're guaranteed to get a huge amount of false positives, if not all of them. Well, all of them are false positives, just based on what I just said about them not even being able to test for this thing called COVID because they can't find it. Plans to test school children in England with controversial lateral flow tests have been thrown into disarray after it emerged it was very likely children and their parents would be asked to self-isolate unnecessarily. Well, that's already happened. Every pupil who received a positive test result after taking a rapid lateral flow device, LFD test at school, should check the result against a so-called gold standard laboratory test known as a PCR test, due to the fact that the LFD result was just as likely to be a false positive as a true positive, a leading statistician has said. All LFD positives should be subject to PCR confirmation. So you're going to get a really, really useless test confirmed by another really, really useless test. When we are asking all children to undergo such testing, Professor Sheila Bird, a member of the Royal Statistical Society, told BBC Radio 4's Today programme. I think she's for the birds. She said it was very likely a positive LFD result would be false. The concern is that the void rate with LFDs is about as high as the positive rate. About as many tests are void as tests positive. It may be you've taken them badly or the kit was performed badly. Well, if they perform a PCR test badly, they're going to do you brain damage. So I don't know what they're doing with this one. Secondary pupils returning to classrooms in England on Monday will be asked to undertake 3 initial LFD tests at school, which, because staff are trained to guide children taking the tests, is deemed to be an assisted test centre. These staff aren't doctors. I'm assuming they're school teachers, but they know nothing about medical tests. But why are parents consenting to this? Why are the parents not up in arms about this? Because you know what's going to happen. These, if they've still got jobs, the children are going to be told that they've tested positive. They're going to have to go home. Their parents are going to have to stay in the home. They're not going to be able to go to work, as I say, if they've still got a job left. And it's going to cause mayhem throughout the school system, which is exactly what they want, of course, because they don't want the schools to open at all. It's quite obvious. When the LFD test is taken at an assisted test centre, such as a school, no, it's a school, it's actually a school, the Department of Education confirmed that children who falsely test positive, that's an oxymoron, isn't it? i.e. they subsequently take and receive a negative PCR test, are not allowed to stop self-isolating and return to school. They are not allowed to stop self-isolating and return to school, which implies they were self-isolating in the first place. So why are they getting tested? A DfE spokesperson said, as has always been the case, a negative PCR test does not release an individual from self-isolation requirements. So it doesn't matter if you test negative for something they can't find, you're still going to be locked up. If you test positive, you get locked up. What's not obvious about that? He added, individuals with a positive LFD test result from an assisted test site will need to self-isolate in line with the guidance for households with possible coronavirus infection. Possible. Well, it's all possible, isn't it? Everything's possible. This means that next week, schools will have no choice but to inform families that a negative result with the gold standard PCR test does not override the false positive LFD result when it is taken at a school test site, an oddity that Bird said she was shocked by. Really? I think there is sufficient capacity to be offering the PCR confirmation for all LFD positives, she said. I wonder who's going to give the PCR tests. Is it going to be these trained teachers? These things are only supposed to be given by somebody who's highly trained to give them, because there is a risk you could damage somebody's brain with it. But I tell you, if school teachers are doing it, they'll leave themselves wide open to criminal actions taken against them. According to the latest NHS test and trace figures, just 0.24% of lateral flow tests conducted in the week ending 24th of February found positive cases, a figure so low it is actually below the 0.32% false positive rate for these tests. The problem with these lateral flow tests is they're not sensitive enough to do the job they're meant to do. Just like the PCR tests, they're too sensitive to do the jobs they're supposed to do because they make them too sensitive. Said Mary Boosted, or Busted maybe, I don't know. Maybe she is busted. The Joint General Secretary of the National Education Union. The PCR test is much more reliable than what? So what I'd hope in this situation is schools get evidence of a PCR test and allow the pupils to be in school. But they just said even if a PCR test comes back negative, you have to self-isolate. In the same article. She said the debacle raised questions around the usefulness of lateral flow tests, or the uselessness, that should be. The danger is that young people and children who don't have COVID are kept off school unnecessarily because of a false positive. Well, that's already been happening. And those who have COVID will go to school because they got a false negative. That is the danger because they are simply not accurate enough. Confusingly, I bet the teachers are confused, the pupils are confused, the parents are confused, and the idiots giving the tests are confused as well. Or just brainless, I don't know. Confusingly, pupils who take LFD tests at home which they will be asked to do twice a week once the school stops testing them, are required to take a PCR test to confirm the result if they receive a positive LFD result. Did everybody get that? But they are not required to do this if they take the test at school. What's the difference? Does COVID know you're in school or not? One father decided to speak out about the accuracy of LFD tests after his son's LFD test came back positive. He doesn't leave the house. He's a teenage boy. He shows no symptoms and he's not unwell, the man told the Today programme. The school told us to get a PCR to double check it. The result came back the next day and was negative. We spoke to NHS 111 and they said the PCR test was the important one and the LFD was clearly a false positive and that we should be able to remove the self-isolation through track and trace. So there you go. You've only got to be tracked and traced. It's okay. But they refused to remove the self-isolation order, he said. Any positive from a PCR or LFD was to be taken as a positive, and there were no exceptions to the rule. He said, we've got to isolate when we know he's not unwell. If this is ramified across 24,000 schools, even if it's just one child per school who gets a false positive, that's 24,000 families who have to self-isolate and can't work. That's the whole point of it, isn't it? The DfE spokesman, politically incorrect, spokesperson it says here, sorry about that folks, in case I offended anybody, a spokes thing said, the rapid asymptomatic testing programme for education has been set up to support the return of all students to nurseries, schools and colleges. All staff, secondary and college students, their families and the families of primary school children will have access to twice weekly testing as an additional reassurance on top of the strengthened safety measures in place from 8th of March. We encourage everyone to consent to testing, following in the footsteps of the staff and students who have already taken millions of tests over the past weeks while schools have been open only to critical worker and vulnerable children. So it's all about testing again, testing. And of course, we know what testing is for. It's just to ramp up the numbers and shut down society yet again. That'll be the excuse, of course. But something else that's been happening, the Six Nations rugby has been thrown into chaos apparently because some French rugby player or a few French rugby players supposedly have COVID, but they don't have any symptoms, of course. But this is the Sunday Times. Experts find no evidence that COVID is transmitted on the field, which means it's not transmitted at all anywhere, doesn't it? Not a single case of on-the-field transmission of the COVID-19 virus has been confirmed in football, rugby union, rugby league or American football during a full year of the pandemic, medical experts have revealed. Detailed tracing of players who have tested positive for the virus has been carried out in all the sports, but in every case, the transmission was put down to off-the-field contact, such as in meeting rooms, cars and indoor activities. Just remember that with all these people walking about with masks out in the fresh air. Yeah. The sports findings should provide a strong argument that outdoor community and elite sports can be played with minimal risk to the participants, and perhaps that grassroots and women's rugby union can return without the need for the adapted rules that have banned scrums and mauls. Well, without a scrum and a maul, it's not called rugby anymore, is it? It's just like a game of tag. But the nonsense here is that they're saying, oh, it can only be spread indoors now. Well, if you're in a scrum, I'd suggest that you're far closer to another human being than you're ever likely to be in a restaurant or a bar. Okay? Have you seen where these people put their heads? So, I think we're waiting for Anne McCloskey. I'm not sure if she's going to turn up, but we shall live in hope, I guess. But we'll do one more article and then go to a piece of music, and then hopefully we can get Dr. Anne McCloskey on the line. This is from the irishsentinel.com, from a site called News Target. And this is, again, fact checkers, right? Science, ? PolitiFact denies the fact that we're born boys or girls. You can tell a fact-checker is marching to the drumbeat of the libertine left when they labour to deny the biological fact that the overwhelming majority of humans are born as either boys or girls. On Thursday, PolitiFact took sides in the hallway Twitter battle between freshman Congresswoman Marie Newman and Marjorie Taylor Greene over the so-called Equality Act being debated. We checked, and the science is clear. Gender identity goes beyond male and female. How can you trust any fact check from people who are this slippery with obvious facts? On Thursday, PolitiFact wasn't subtle by illustrating their check with a picture of left-wing activists holding up a sign reading "Trans Equality Now." Daniel Funk and Miriam Valverde spared Representative Greene one of those false ratings on the truthometer, but they took the typical approach of finding liberal experts to add some kind of pseudo-facticity to their gender deconstructionist arguments. Much of the political debate has centred on gender identity, particularly Greene's notion that there are two genders. However, public health agencies, doctors and biologists say science is clear. Gender identity goes beyond male and female. Well, I don't know what kind of pseudoscientists and pseudo-doctors these people are. Agencies, biologists. Insane. That's the only word for them, insane. Sex is a biological term. Gender is a social construct, said Ignacio T. Moore, a biological sciences professor at Virginia Tech. In other words, gender can vary with society and culture. This guy's a maniac, a real maniac. The belief that there are only two genders is an oversimplification, and what science really tells us is that it is more complicated, said Dr. Jason Rafferty, a clinical assistant professor at Brown University. Well, he's brown-nosing someday. It won't surprise you that Professor Moore teaches a biology of sex course to correct society and a general lack of scientific interest and understanding when it comes to sex and gender. He plays devil's advocate with students who haven't stretched their minds on the gender spectrum. They discuss controversies like transgender women competing with biological women in sports, so the students are better informed, so when they become voting members of society, they can make informed decisions. They don't get to make an informed decision when it comes to masks and vaccines, though. And remember the article, I think it was last week, I mentioned one of these transgender bender people became a boxer and fractured a female boxer's skull because he was actually a full-grown man. Sound like an objective expert? No. There's no sign that Funk and Valverde ever sought a conservative counterpoint on this story loaded up with liberals. PolitiFact stresses that a tiny minority of people are intersex. Estimates for the proportion of babies who are born intersex range from 0.018% to 1.7%, depending on how intersex is defined. Nature provides variations in sex and humans decide how to categorise them, said Alice Dreger, a bioethicist who has researched differences of sex development. Nature doesn't tell us who counts as male, who counts as female, and who counts as intersex. We draw those lines, she said. An objective expert, Alice Dreger, donated repeatedly to Obama for president and other Democrats and wrote a book called Galileo's Middle Finger, Heretics, Activists, and the Search for Justice in Science. A reviewer explained, for 2 decades, historian Alice Dreger has led a life of extraordinary engagement, combining activist service to victims of unethical medical research with defence of scientists whose work has outraged identity politics activists. Maybe she wants to get involved in the unethical medical research that's going on right now instead of wasting her time on this garbage. The article ends not on the facts, but about how experts worry about LGBTQ, and I'll add in the I and the P for pedosexual, because they seem to keep leaving that off these days, people at the hands of narrow-minded two-gender believers. A misunderstanding of gender identity and sex deserves clarification, experts said, because LGBTQIP Americans, particularly youth, face more adverse health outcomes than other Americans. Well, what's that got to do with gender? The big thing to remember is that it's not just politics, Rafferty said. These are people's lives. Common sense understanding of gender causes adverse health outcomes, so embrace gender fluidity if you have any compassion. That's the fact-checking message. That's just Bizarre. Okay, I think we'll go to a piece of music now and try and get Dr. Anne McCloskey on the line, if possible. Welcome back to Reality Bytes on the 7th of March 2021 in association with the Irish Sentinel.com. And we finally got Anne McCloskey on the line, Dr. Anne McCloskey. And she's just going to introduce herself. And as listeners to this broadcast know, I always get a guest to give a quick bio of how they got to where they are today and what led them to the conclusions that there was something wrong. So take it away, Anne, and we'll go on to the latest article, which, as you pointed out to me there, was printed in the British Medical Journal last week.
Okay, Neil, well, thanks very much for the invitation to come on to your radio programme. My name is Anne McCloskey, and I am a medical doctor. I live and work in Derry in the north of Ireland. And on the 18th of June this year will be the 40th anniversary of my graduation from University College Dublin. So I've been at this job for an awful long time. I worked in paediatrics, first of all, and then in community paediatrics, which I suppose is the interface between children, mainly children with special educational needs and the educational system. And then I moved into general practice, and I've worked here in Derry in a practice in an area of high socioeconomic deprivation, an area with 60% child poverty, according to Derry Council's own statistics. And I've sort of always been involved in people politics. I was involved in Republican politics for most of my adult life. And I use the word, the politics with a small p, because it's kind of how the politics affect people who are on the edge and on the margins of society. So I then took early retirement and moved into politics, and I was elected to Derry and Strabane District Council here in 2 years ago. But unfortunately, we had a new, brand new all island of Ireland political party called AONTU, AONTU FADA, which is the Irish word for unity or cohesion. And the plan, our leader, Peadar Tóibín, left Sinn Féin. He had been a Sinn Féin TD, Teachta Dála, for a decade or more. And he left over the abortion issue because Sinn Féin would not allow him a conscience vote, whereby when the amendment to remove the protection of the right to life was removed from the Irish Constitution, Sinn Féin would not allow their members to have a vote in accordance with their conscience. And Peadar, to his everlasting credit, resigned from Sinn Féin, where he had a very senior position. And for example, in a government with Sinn Féin in charge, he would have been a shoo-in for finance minister. You know, he's an economist, and he's a really talented, hard-working person. So anyway, I was deputy leader to Peadar, but unfortunately then came what we call the Roni, the Corona baloney, and I, from very early on in the council, saw that this simply did not stack up. And interestingly, I'm just looking, it's I think this day last year, on the 7th of March last year, that we had an emergency council meeting to discuss what we were going to do about the St. Patrick's Day parade, because as everybody knows, every town in Ireland goes a wee bit bonkers on St. Patrick's Day. And Derry would have been like, would have had a big open air parade, and you know, the green beer and the leprechaun suits and the whole 9 yards. So I remember at that council meeting saying, and this now, as I say, was on the 7th of March, we know what the case fatality of this infection is. We know from the figures in China and in Italy, and in, you know, even locally, you know, we knew that this was a disease which overwhelmingly affected very old, very frail, multiply comorbid people, and that even, you know, people who contracted it, that the vast majority recovered. So we knew that before any of this dystopian just way of dealing with disease that we now are implementing, like as if there never was any other way of doing it.
Yeah. Just to interrupt you. Were any more members at that meeting medical doctors, or just yourself?
No.
So you were actually the only one qualified
not
to talk about it.
Not very many doctors end up in politics. They've more sense.
Yeah. So you were actually the only one with any qualification to talk about this at that meeting.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say that. And at that time, I mean, I was reading the work from Stanford and looking at the Euromomo data and really trying to get a handle. And I mean, I get it. We did not know what we were dealing with. But before the first lockdown, we had a fair idea what we were dealing with, Yeah. And
after the first week over here that the figures came out, I showed my wife a calculator and I just did a quick calculation and I knew right away it was a scam because the numbers just didn't add up.
Was somewhere in the region. At that time, I knew. I think the figure I used in the council meeting was 0.3, percent, and this was in the council meeting, and it turns out to be somewhere in the region of 0.2. Somewhere between 0.2 and 0.3. So that we knew that right from day dot. And as I say, the rest is history. So I argued in the council. I argued about the PCR test. I argued about the scamdemic. I argued about, at every meeting, and they just wrote me off as a lunatic. These people who know almost nothing about medicine or epidemiology, or, I was just regarded as some sort of a freak show. And I did say in the summer, we had some limited freedom over the summer, and I did say that and there was talk about a lockdown then going into the autumn, and I did say that if Derry Staban District Council colluded in locking up the people of my city again and not allowing them their human rights and the freedom to associate and to earn a living and to, all of the things that were just so arbitrarily denied them, if the council allowed that to happen, I was going to resign. So, my career in politics was fairly short. I resigned, and I resigned from the deputy leadership of the Intu because, again, the party, in my view, were not taking a robust and science-driven view of what was happening, and they were looking to...
You probably did the right thing.
I think that Patter always said he wouldn't do, hold his finger in the air to see what way the wind is blowing.
Yeah, you probably did the right thing. You probably did the right thing because these days there's no good people in politics.
I'm not saying I'm particularly good, but on this issue, I have no doubt, and everything that has happened in between, with chilling congruity all over the world, makes me recognise that there's no doubt that I was correct. It's not easy. It's been a lonely road in my profession. Like everybody else.
I should have said there's no moral people in politics. That's what I should have said. Apart from the gentleman you mentioned there who resigned for his conscience, which is very rare, very, very rare in politics.
Well, totally, and that's why it broke my heart to kind of pull the door closed on Intu as well, because but he is not right on this issue, and he did not. I mean, myself and a nurse here who works in the north, who are party members, were feeding him stats, data, links to stuff right from the beginning, and he just couldn't accept it. And I suspect that there were people in high places in Dublin who were making it their job to make sure that he stayed. Wouldn't touch it. Again, it's very sad. We, as a new fledgling political party, which actually was I thought was going to work really well, to have this in the first year of our existence. And we fought 4 elections as well. 3 in the north and 2 in the south, 5 elections in a year. So on no money. It was a challenging time.
Yeah. But, okay. Let's move on to this article that you had published in the British Medical Journal. I don't know if you had it published or they just published it from someone else. I'm not sure.
Well, it was in response to an editorial. The front cover of the BMJ, I think about 2 weeks ago, was this dark picture with these serried rows of candles and, the big headline, 100,000 deaths. Where did we go wrong? I'm just looking going, that's nonsense. There wasn't 100,000 deaths, and we didn't do anything wrong because none of those deaths were preventable. This happened, but if you take the PCR test out of the equation, there's actually nothing to see. If you look at the total all-cause mortality figures for all of the developed world, there's no statistically significant difference over the last decade, and it's just there's nothing to see. in terms of all-cause mortality.
Yeah, well, that's the figure they can't mess around with, because it just takes into consideration everybody who's died. So that's the figure you have to look at. You can't separate it out into heart attacks, this, that, and the next thing. You can't do that. You just take the total mortality, and you say, okay, how many people died this year, last year, and as you say, it's the same all across the world. There is no difference, and in many cases, less people died during the so-called pandemic.
In Ireland, on this island of Ireland, less people.
Yeah, and the average age, I think, of lifespan in Ireland, I think, I'm not sure if it's generally a mix of male and female, but it was 82, I think, and the average age of so-called COVID deaths was 84. So those people had lived 2 years longer even than they were technically supposed to, going by the statistics, and yet there was. But
and don't forget, nobody died of other causes. Flu,
well, of course not.
Pneumonia, gone. COPD, gone.
Yeah,
that's the whole thing. Is just.
That's what I tried to get.
Articulate people don't see this, or allow themselves to see.
Yeah, I don't understand how intelligent, articulate people can possibly believe that the flu has disappeared for the first time in human history, and all of a sudden there's a new label stuck on it called COVID-19.
But you see, that's the lockdowns. This is what they say. I mean, it's just bizarre.
Well, again, I read it last week. If the flu has disappeared and they're saying it's because of masks and washing your hands, then why hasn't COVID disappeared?
Yeah.
If it's so effective.
this thing, it's insane. It's insane. And as I say, I pointed out, I gave a speech which kind of went a wee bit crazy in our town square in, I think it was the month of July, maybe end of July, beginning of August or something. And I was talking about the way that for the first time ever in medical history, we changed how we wrote death certificates. We changed how we counted a disease, so that the disease didn't actually have to have anything to do with your death, but that if you had a positive PCR test, and more of PCR tests later if you want to go there, if you had a positive PCR test within 28 days of your death from whatever cause, you were attributed to COVID. And if you had no positive PCR test but had symptoms consistent with COVID, which is the final common pathway which most people have when they're dying, they get short of breath, they get fevers, these things that the human body can only respond in so many ways to an insult. So that if you had, fever and shortness of breath as a terminal event, no matter what, even if you didn't have a PCR test, that was clinically to go down as a COVID death. And people in hospitals came under incredible pressure to, I use the word advisedly, to fraudulently complete death certification. And we still haven't been able to find out if there was a financial incentive for hospitals to do that. Certainly I have many friends who are consultants, and they said that they didn't get anything for it, but that there does seem to have been a huge pressure from management and
it was
at that level.
Yeah, it was widely reported in America that the consultants, doctors, were getting $39,000 for every patient they put on a ventilator. For every patient. From the government, from the taxpayer.
Of course, it wasn't from the government. This is from their own people. This is the really bizarre thing. All these furlough schemes, they're not getting anything. That's their children's money. That's their children's future. They're being paid with by these craven.
What they actually got was a 20% pay cut, and I didn't see any. I didn't see any union representatives standing up and saying, hold on a minute. Now, if that had happened a year ago or a year and a bit ago, and the government had come out and said, okay, we're going to cut everybody's wages by 20%, the whole country would have been out on strike.
Yeah. Oh, it's the degree. I'd say the people who are behind this are absolutely flabbergasted at how little resistance there's been. I mean, I come from a society that was in conflict for 50 years. People stood up for themselves, and they went out and objected, and they had mass protests, and we put graffiti over things. There's not even these blooming hands, face, space posters that are everywhere. No one's even defaced them. Or I'm a sort of a respectable citizen. I want to go out and buy spray paint.
Well, I I think you're totally justified in doing so, because
Totally.
you're under attack. You're under attack by your own government, and that's something that's throughout history.
Psychological abuse.
Yeah,
psychological, emotional, physical, because don't forget, in the area covered by the NHS, we're expecting an extra 500,000 deaths because of the delayed health care and the things which have been postponed and the non-screening for cancer and all of these things. This is crimes against humanity perpetrated by governments upon their own people with the collusion of the people, with the acceptance. Really, it's for someone who's always been a bit of a rebel, it's very disheartening.
Well, I left Scotland. I left Scotland in 19 something many years ago because I was sick of the apathy of Scottish people, and I would sit back and look at it and think, why are they putting up with this? Why are they putting up with it? Because there's nothing I could do about it as an individual. There's nothing I could do. I wasn't in a position of power or anything. But what I see happening now in Scotland, Ireland, England, is just this. I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it. It's just mass compliance to idiocy, because there's none of it makes sense.
There's been an inculcated kind of self-loathing in our societies, where people have nearly come to think that the crimes of their ancestors are their fault. This nonsense on all this identity politics and that, which cows people and separates people. And I mean, even if you look at the conflict in this island, you look and see that none of that matters in the face of this threat. But I actually have really good news about where because I think it's time to stop talking about a virus. This never had anything to do with health or viruses. And right from the start, it had to do with, right from day dot, they started on about vaccines and these passports and this global identity where every city. I mean, why would you vaccinate 7.8 billion people against something which isn't going to do any harm to 7.79999 billion people? Do you know what I mean?
Well, exactly.
Why would you do that unless there was another pretext?
Well,
and
obviously,
this is the one you're not allowed to discuss.
Yeah, I just read an article before you came on, and I read a few that were kind of relevant to the subject we were going to talk about. And one of the things that is being openly admitted is that you will not be protected by this, but if you've got to take the vaccine to protect others, but you'll be a super spreader if you've been vaccinated, and that's in the mainstream media, and you will not be
utter nonsense.
It said you'll be a super.
Diseases have never ever behaved like this ever.
No,
the word super spreader. There is no such thing as a super spreader.
No, but they said
this is just a figment of somebody's.
Yeah, the way they worded it was you'll be a super spreader of the vaccine. That's what they said, a super spreader of the vaccine. I thought it was a disease we were talking about. Well, exactly. I don't know what that means. But
I don't think it means anything.
No, but I don't think you can spread a vaccine unless you pour it over somebody's head or something. I don't know. But this thing itself has no basis, as you say, no basis in science whatsoever, because it does not come under any definition of what a vaccine is supposed to do in theory. It doesn't protect
it's actually not a vaccine either.
No, it's not a vaccine.
The mRNA one is not a vaccine. It's an injectable operating system, as its manufacturers say. Exactly. But it's. I mean, I was out. This we know from SARS-CoV-1 in 2003. They looked at. I think they got a cohort of 400 people who they knew had been infected with that, and looked at their T cell immunity. Now, 17 years later, those people were fully immune to that. So that we already know they're not looking at T-cell immunity, even though there is a test for that, because that would tell the truth. And that's where they're not going to go. So it's all about... I was out in the house. I was doing a house call the other day. I was working in the out-of-hours centre. I was out to a lovely old couple in their 80s. With the husband had problems with his breathing, and he was adamantly refusing to go to the hospital, and rightly so. That's the first thing you get when you go into somebody's house. The first thing old people say is, I'm not going to hospital, doctor. They do not want to be separated from their loved ones and die on their own. They just won't go, and they're right. So anyway, I was chatting away to him and whatever, and then she says, the wee woman said, she says, we both had it, in January. She says, and we were grand. We wouldn't even have known we had it at all if we hadn't got the test. So these people were cases and they didn't know. And then if they had gone to a supermarket, somebody's phone would have pinged and they would have had to go and get a test to know that they didn't have it, or they knew they had it and had no symptoms too. It's just this Ponzi scheme, this house of cards. It's insane. So I said, God, that's great. You had it. You know, you're immune for life. You won't have to, you're not going to get it again. Look, you came through it. Isn't it wonderful? Aye, but we got the vaccine last week. You're just going, oh dear. You know, it's so sad.
Yeah, you mentioned a PCR test earlier, and I've mentioned it a number of times on here. But of course, just coincidentally, the WHO even changed the use of that. Just coincidentally on Inauguration Day for Joe Biden. But to reduce the cycle rate,
they started introducing vaccines.
Yeah, and of course it was to bring the case numbers down. To make Joe Biden look like the savior of the planet, but it's also they're now bringing in. I just read an article again before you came on about the lateral flow tests, which were deemed. I read an article last week that said they were even less accurate than a PCR, and you've got to have a PCR test to back up the lateral flow test. Yeah. So it's just madness.
Yeah. Well, the thing about all this mass testing of asymptomatic people is you just stop testing and everything will go away. If you stop testing, there will be nothing to see. So I actually, there's a group here in Ireland that I'm associated with, a group of doctors and statisticians and that are quite keen to have these lateral flow tests introduced as a way, I suppose, of giving the government a fig leaf to cover their stupidity. You know, that they can sort of say, you know, this is the way out. And, you know, but I actually object to that because you're still promoting the story that there is something that is a danger to people out there that needs tested for. We need to stop testing. We need to look. The only people who are cases of a disease since Hippocrates are people who have symptoms, who are ill, who are feeling unwell, who have things you can measure, like a temperature, raised respiratory rate. These are cases of disease. A positive test, particularly a PCR test, it's just an irrelevance.
Yeah, I don't mean to be crude, but it's like going for a syphilis test if you know how to have sex. You know, it's bizarre.
This is an analogy I have heard. You know, it's nuts. And Carrie Mullis, the inventor of the PCR test, and he got a Nobel laureate. Unfortunately, he passed away last year. He said that if you cycle up enough, anything becomes positive, and that these are not a diagnostic test.
But they're not even tested
here
for COVID.
In the north of Ireland, PCR requests to our 6 health boards last week. They freedom of information. They came back and they're all doing 40 to 45 cycles. You know, what do they not know?
Well,
they do know.
Yeah, the WHO's new criteria is in January 20th. Yeah, they said that the PCR test had to be followed up by a clinical physician's appointment. Basically, you had to be expected by a doctor to see if you actually had symptoms, but nobody's doing that.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah, nobody's doing that.
I mean, Derry was locked down. Again, I'm going back to the local here. A lot of your listeners won't know where Derry is. But Derry was locked down with the hospitals empty, with nobody sick. I'm exaggerating here. You know, there was nothing happening. I did one of the COVID sessions in our local hospital where people, there were 15 members of staff, 3 doctors, about 10 nurses, a few admin staff, and in a 4-hour shift, we saw 3 patients, none of whom had anything remotely like COVID. Somebody had bought one of these SATS monitors on the internet and didn't know how to work it. Somebody else had asthma, and there was a wee old man with heart failure who actually ended up being admitted. But there was nobody. And the doctors there were telling me this was absolutely standard. Every day they were watching Netflix, they were doing their knitting, they were gossiping, they were catching up on paperwork, they were messing with their phones. You know,
and dancing. And dancing.
Yeah, dancing. Good Lord, you know, if you were trying to... But you know what? It's actually not the fault. You know, I'm trying to be kind to people because, I mean, we've had this incessant propaganda, every news bulletin, I haven't had the television on or the radio now since March. I've been trying to get on television and radio programs. They won't let. I've offered to debate our Minister for Health at a time and venue of his choosing, any hour of the day or night, and the same for all these media rock star doctors whom I know personally. You know, Debate with me. Let me on. No, you cannot. And as I say, that article I wrote for the BMJ was carried in one of our local newspapers called the Belfast Newsletter. And to be fair, they're the only sort of media outlet that have allowed, me to publish anything there at all. That's just absolute wall of silence. You are not allowed to speak. You're just not. I've spent, again, Facebook, I've 10,000 followers. I've a concerted effort by a crowd of trolls to get me in trouble, to get me struck off the medical register, essentially. And the GMC have written to me and said they can't do that because everything I write is referenced, validated, and based on, guess what, the government's numbers. So... But this is the type of atmosphere that people are trying to get information out in. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. Nothing. And we have had censorship in Ireland before, but this is OTT.
My wife and I have talked about this. That those social media platforms like Facebook, etc., who are censoring people, are actually complicit in the deaths of a lot of people because people cannot get relevant information or factual information because they're censoring. So they're complicit. They're complicit, and as is the mainstream media. And I think if we ever get through this and back to some kind of normality, I think it's very important that the heads of all these media outlets, etc., are basically arrested and put through a Nuremberg style trial for, as you say, crimes against humanity.
There's brilliant work going on. For example, Professor Jay Bhattacharya has produced a document of evidence, a book of evidence which can be used and tweaked for each jurisdiction, so that for the 26 counties in the north of Ireland and for England, this can be used, that this can be used as a template to take court cases. And I mean, this evidence is overwhelming. There's hundreds of references and, to hard data and scientific papers. And this will happen. This will happen. These people will be held accountable. And, there's, I think, more and more people. I just was at a meeting. That's why there was a bit of chaos at the beginning of this. I was at a meeting today where all across the north, we have a group with members of unionist parties, nationalist parties, Republican parties, no parties, every religion, no religion. And we have a core group of about 20. And a lot of them young people with young families, people with a stake in the future, people who care about where we're going, and the old divisions are gone, and we now have Freedom Alliance on the island of Ireland with people from every political background, and we have 4 sort of underpinning requirements, and apart from that you can have whatever political view you want on constitutional issues and all these other things that used to excite us and now are completely irrelevant in the face of this new threat.
Yeah,
and we're
carry on.
All across Ireland, people are coming together, and all of the groups are coalescing, and it's really exciting. It's really exciting. I believe we have a new formula.
Yeah, I think that's an unintended consequence of the government's actions, is they've actually got people together on the one issue that is really affecting everybody. And I spoke to a colleague of mine in Texas recently, and we were talking about what's happening in Israel. And the Israeli government seems to be going after the traditional Jews, and they're also trying to ban the Muslims from going to the mosques. And I thought, how ironic would it be if the Palestinians and those types of people got together with the traditional Jewish people and threw the government out?
Well, these are the types of things that we have to make happen. Ordinary people need to take back their power. One of our, as I say, the underpinning things is that governments are only there by consent of the people who voted for them, and that anybody who makes a decision cannot have a vested interest. The corruption and the nepotism and these contracts handed out to your friends and neighbours, and the revolving door between the boardroom and the cabinet office, and that has to stop. That's over. We need to stop that. It's over.
Yeah. Well, one recent example of that was Matt Hancock giving out PPE contracts to his friends, and not a thing done about it. Openly admitted in media.
Head of Sinn Féin here in Ireland has family, deeply, deeply involved in the pharmaceutical industry. You know, and Hancock, yeah, totally. And the man, he was in court. But
yeah, he was found guilty. He was found guilty.
He's not in jail yet, but he will be.
Yet. Well,
I'm not a vindictive person, but I can make an exception.
No, I think the time for sympathy for these types of individuals is long gone, because they have destroyed the lives of, if you go globally, they've destroyed the lives of millions of people, and I think really
globally, I mean, there's millions pushed into starvation and poverty.
Absolutely.
And I look around me here, and it's like everything. This is the biggest transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it started with the banking crash, and then the whole climate thing, where these highly subsidized, useless alternative sources of very expensive energy are being paid for by ordinary people. You know, the whole transfer to these elites is, you know, if we don't resist it, then the future is going to be a very bleak place, and we need to keep.
Yeah, going back to what you were saying in the past, that people would have been, well, I'm not going to say up in arms in the north, because that's a different argument, but people would have been so angry at the government that they would have been out in the streets in their thousands protesting against this type of thing. And students have been absolutely neutered from what I can see, because they used to be the biggest source of protest, going back to the anti-war movements of the past and things like that. But the students they don't protest anything anymore, and it's their future we're talking about. Hello, welcome back to Early Bytes Radio on the 7th of March. The gremlins kicked in again and we got cut off, but we're back again. And I think I was getting to the point of talking about students, because and you mentioned in the past that people would have been really angry and they'd been out in the streets if anything remotely like this had been even suggested, never mind actually carried out. But the students, and you're talking about their future is up in the air. They if this is allowed to continue, they have no future. It's as simple as that. And that's a big reason why the schools are being closed, etc., because the system knows that they don't have to educate students for jobs that will not exist in the future. Or maybe the students themselves won't even exist in the future. Who knows?
Well, I think that, taken to its logical conclusion, that seems to be the plan.
Yeah.
Which is a chilling thought. But
yeah, students used to protest big time about all issues, anti-war, you name it. The students were one of the first groups to be out in the street, because I think back in those days they had a real sense of, well, this is our future, that we're talking about here. The only ones you seem to get now are the climate idiots and people that are just totally brainwashed by big organisations and doing stupid things. But like you said there, I think this generation of students, young children, whatever, could very well be the last if they go down the road of getting this vaccine and the next one and the next one and the next one, because it's not going to stop. It's going to be continual vaccination, and that's the end of fertility, shall we say, which means the end of people.
Well, I think certainly there are very real concerns about the effects that these are going to have on fertility and on the viability of unborn babies. And this is not fear mongering. We just simply don't know. We just simply don't know. As I say, we are injecting into people's bodies not a protein, but a code for a protein, which may change, and which your body then will react to. Now, that is the definition of an autoimmune disease.
Yeah,
we just simply don't know.
Yeah, you're the first doctor I've actually spoken to in the past year on this issue, first medical doctor, and it was I've lost my train of thought now. What was I going to ask you? It's gone.
You're talking about the fertility problems around the vaccines and stuff like that.
It wasn't. No, I know what it was. I'll come on to that, because I read an article about squirrels last week. I'll come on to that in a second. But it was about how some of these toxins, these poisons that they're trying to pass off as vaccines, have to be stored at such low temperatures. And I'm curious to know how it's unsafe if it's thawed out, but it's okay to inject it into the human body, which is 32 degrees or 36, whatever it is. How can that suddenly become safe?
this is not my specialist subject, but what I do know is that we doctors have a set of rules called the Montgomery Principles, and there was a law case about this, and it's recognised in international law that before you do anything to someone, you must give them an honest assessment of the risk benefits. That risk benefit analysis. You must explain to them even the side effects, the possible side effects, and even outcomes that are quite unusual must be discussed with the person. And anything short of that is a crime called battery. So that these Montgomery Principles, and you cannot get informed consent for an unlicensed injection or substance, or these things are unlicensed. They have emergency cover, and you cannot get informed consent whenever the people are actually being enrolled in a phase 3 clinical trial and are not being told that. People are not, and I actually once again send freedom of information a request to government asking those questions. How do you give informed consent? Are people being told that these are unlicensed medications? Are they being told that they are participating in a clinical trial? Are they being told that there are no outcome studies for side effects in terms, there just aren't. And they're not powered. The studies that they've done are not powerful enough to show, because death from coronavirus is such, or death from whatever this is such an unusual event. The studies aren't powered to show that they reduce mortality or even hospital admissions, because again, that's a very rare event. So this whole thing is nonsense. They're just nonsense. And people, my profession in this town, except for me, are going along with it. People that I would have, respected and worked with, and you go, how can you not understand that this is a crime, what you're doing? And we're developing letters, that to hold the doctor and their Medical Defence Association personally responsible for harms, and giving these to people, and I think that's an important.
I was going to mention that.
Thing for people to do to take their power back. And it's important. Yeah. I
was going to mention that because I've mentioned it a few times over the past few weeks. That under the Nuremberg Code, it is a crime against humanity to conduct medical experiments on people without their knowledge. Now, as you say, these people have not been informed that this is still an experimental phase 3 trial that they're in. And the doctors, although they've been given supposedly blanket immunity for any possible side effects, including death that occurs from the injection, they're not covered under Nuremberg for not informing people that they're part of a medical experiment. And that's a crime against humanity, which carries a far bigger sentence than they're going to ever get for damaging somebody with a vaccine.
It's incredible. And interestingly, the drug companies are completely indemnified, but the doctors aren't. If you state to them, I am holding you, not the government, not the drug, you personally, the person who administers this to me, I am holding you personally responsible for any outcome or harm. And again, people need to be given these to the headmasters of schools who are expecting children to have PCR tests or expecting children to wear masks all day. I am holding you person, personally responsible for any adverse outcome which may result. And this is a way of combating this. And these are tools that people need to develop in their own communities to use. It's the only hope we have of escaping. And I mean, the fear has. Don't forget, these SAGE and these government advisors. Most of these aren't virologists or epidemiologists. A lot of these are psychologists, and they use neurolinguistic programming and behavioural insights and psychology to instill terror. And here in Ireland, we have seen the very same thing that's happened in England, where you have battalions of the British Army, producing this propaganda and this psychological, subjection of people's critical thinking. It's very cleverly put together. And this didn't happen by accident. This is a massive operation, or it's a huge.
It's been put together over many years. So this is not an accident that is happening now. Yeah, psychopathic, of course. Well, you'd have to be a psychopath to do this, wouldn't you? Because nobody in their right mind would dream of such a big lie, except the likes of Hitler and Stalin, I suppose. But or Chairman Mao.
How do these people sleep?
Well, they have no
I
conscience.
just,
They have no conscience. It doesn't matter to them. But I was going to go back to the squirrels, right? I read an article last week.
I'm dying to hear about the squirrels.
Right?
Again,
Squirrels.
not an area of my expertise. But
No, nor mine. But it's to do with mRNA. It's to do with mRNA vaccines. They did a study apparently that suggested that they could wipe out one breed of squirrels over another. I think the reds and the greys. I'm not quite sure which one it was they wanted to wipe out. But they gave them an MRA injection. They're going to give them an MRA injection, which will cause sterility in the other breed. So there you go. Just back to what we were talking about before, sterilising children.
I mean,
there you are.
I saw our friend Billy Goats addressing would look like American servicemen or something, and talking about immunising against personality traits such as aggression or religiosity. Again, I don't know the provenance of that, but this is what this is where this is going, is that they can immunise us against traits which the powerful see as unpleasant, unacceptable, or a threat to their hegemony.
I think what it is that any psychopath sees in humanity is what they want to wipe out. We dropped again. Okay. Welcome back to Reality Bytes, and I will hold my hand up in shame. I ran out of money on Skype and the call was dropped. So there you go. Just added $5, so we should be okay for the next few minutes at least anyway. So yeah, I don't know where we finished off there.
We were talking about the squirrels and the sterility and the way that these people now think it's appropriate to immunise us against things which they don't like.
Yeah, I was saying that psychopaths would like nothing better than us to be as emotionless as they are, because then we can't have normal human interaction. And again, going back to the masks and all that kind of thing, that's part of that as well. That is stopping
no doubt, yeah.
And it's training people to be scared of each other.
Yeah, and they hate humans. We are the biohazards. We are the contaminants. We are the fungus on the earth. And they hate families because the family unit is the real threat to their power. The families, individuals, families, communities. These are the things they want to take away. These things that have held our societies together for millennia. These are what these people hate most.
And I think it's very important that we started off talking about how the Irish have capitulated, how the Scots and English have capitulated. But in the past, they were always a clan structure, and that clan structure has been systematically destroyed over the last few hundred years. And
none of this was organic. I think it was.
No.
Dismantled. Yeah.
Yeah, and now it's getting down to the whole core of the family. It's right down to the last level. If they could split up the family, which they've been doing again for many, many years, divorce rates are sky high, etc. They've been doing that as well. But I think we should finish positively. And what you were saying earlier about all these different groups getting together, Catholics, Protestants, and in the case of, I sincerely hope that the Muslims and the Christians actually get together, because that would be a real horror for the elites to think that could possibly happen, and they turn on them.
Wouldn't it be wonderful? It be wonderful? Because don't forget, the people who are being affected by this have far more in common than any of them have with the people who are subjecting them to this. We are the people who have, the old thing, we are the many, they are the few. And if people can just set aside the other stuff that divided us and find that we have a shared interest in protecting our human family from evil. The word is evil, that we can combine our powers, combine our talents. I was in a room today with about 20, 25 people from all walks of life. The talent, the enthusiasm, the dedication, the energy was quite remarkable. And, that's what we have to focus on is trying to persuade people to not by shouting at them or telling them they're stupid or telling them they're sheep, but by trying to wake them up and turn off the TV and, you know, take back your power, take back yourself, take back your
humanity,
your freedom, take it yeah, your humanity.
Yeah.
That's exactly what's at stake here. Is the future of humanity. Yeah, I think this is that's it.
I think we're getting a lot of pushback from parents now. Interestingly, in the States, my wife was telling me she looks at all this stuff. That now that parents have been told they're going to have to take an injection, they're kind of thinking, well, hold on a minute, it was okay for the children, it's not okay for me though, you know. And maybe start to look at the whole issue around vaccines and think, well, why am I doing that to the children when I don't even know anything about it, but I'm not prepared to take something myself?
I think that may be an area where they push us too far, because you mess with my children. And you know, I'm going to react. You know, that's you know, for parents, you know, don't mess with my kids. Just don't do it. Don't go there.
I've never worn a mask in the supermarket. We're in Florida. We've never really had any kind of serious shutdown as such.
I'm going to move there. I actually looked at emigrating to Florida.
Well,
the crocodiles, though, haven't you?
Alligators,
yeah. That's not for it.
Different breeds, that's all. They'll probably sterilize one of them and get rid of the other one, who knows. But it's
hopefully we'll get Freedom Airlines, Dolores Cahill's Freedom Airlines.
I'm keeping an eye on that. Because there's one London to Miami.
If they fly to Florida, I'll come out and talk to you in person.
Well, London to Miami, I think they said the first one was going to be, I think that's June the 6th or something they were trying for. So London to Miami. Miami's about 4 hours from here. But I keep saying to people, we have a little bar here that we go to. Nobody wears masks or anything. Nobody's died, you know, in the past year. And I try to say to people, look, this is so serious that I will never see my family again if this goes on, ever. And they say, why? I said, because I can't take a vaccine to get on an aeroplane. I'm not doing it. I'm just simply not doing it. And that is my family. I said, I could be dead by the time I get there. You know,
but so many people are doing it for that reason. I'm talking to young people going, look, I need to get to Ibiza. I need some holidays, and they're being told, you see, you're not even allowed to mention the V word, you know, except in a positive light. You will be censored, abused, vilified, you know, called all sorts of things. There's no discussion is barred. That's the scary bit.
Well, let's just call it poison then. Let's just call it poison.
Yeah, I found a lot of different ways to spell that word, you know.
But I mean, young people.
Algorithms a wee bit.
Yeah, I think it's
young people. God help them.
I think young people have no experience of real adversity in their lives. This generation, or even the past generation, they've no experience of, in many cases, poverty, if you like, because they've come through an era. Where
it's only been 2 generations. My granny worked in the fields when she was 12 years of age in her bare feet. You know, it's only so recently that we have. My mother worked in a shirt factory here in Derry. It's only, you know, in 2 generations that we've finally got. You know, people have never had it so good, and they've never been less happy. I don't know, you know, and this is nearly like a self-destructive streak in people. It's quite.
Let's go back to what let's go back to what you said earlier about this kind of self-defeatist attitude, and the Irish, the Scots, the Welsh, I guess, and to a large extent the English, were always conquered by somebody, and it's almost like, oh well, here we go again. You know, we're the downtrodden
we Irish
masses.
Would say actually that the English conquered us or tried.
Yeah. Well, the Romans.
Again, these are the arguments of a bygone era.
Yeah, well,
no longer matters.
Yeah, the Romans tried to conquer Scotland, but they had to build a wall to keep us in. So, you know, we had some success somewhere. Yeah. Well, there was another one, Antonines or something like that. But they built the wall to keep us in. People think it was to keep us, you know, trapped, but that we were conquered, but we weren't. It's the only country in Europe, I think, that wasn't conquered by the Romans. But anyway, and Ireland as well, possibly. But
the west of Scotland and Ireland have a very, very deep and shared language and history and culture, and you know, that whole conquest and colonisation thing. So there's great affinity there. I mean, I speak Gaelic, I speak Gaelic Irish, but I also can Scots Gaelic's the same language. So we go to the Outer Hebrides do dancing and music, and it's that we are kindred spirits across.
I was at high school, secondary school, 1979 when Margaret Thatcher came to power, and she banned the teaching of the Scottish language, so I never got to learn it. I had to learn Italian and German or something, which I didn't do, which I refused to even contemplate. But going back to being positive again, and maybe we'll just round off here. But putting aside the divisions, etc., that particularly in the north of Ireland, south of Ireland, the religious conflicts, etc., as they were branded. I wonder if people will actually get to the stage where they think, well, hold on a minute, our divisions of the past were created by the same crowd of people that are doing this today. Maybe different names, but the same organisations, as it might start actually rolling back a lot of perceptions they have about their own societies and stuff, and start dismantling a lot of it and saying, well, this is rubbish. This was created to cause conflict, and it might actually open people's eyes. I think that's already happening. Yeah,
I think that's already happening. Not in the majority or even in a huge minority. But numbers are growing every day. I have no doubt people, particularly now when the summer's there, the hospitals are empty, nobody's, and it's visible, and we're still locked up. And the people like myself who said this a year ago, we will still be locked up in a year's time. People go, don't, nonsense, girl. And here we are. Everything that the conspiracy theorists said was true is happening. Mandated vaccines, blackmail, coercion, to take a medical treatment that you don't need, experiment, all of it's all there. And I think people are waking up. And I have great faith in the human spirit. I really have. And I also, I'm a practicing Catholic. I believe in God, and I have faith that we're going to get through this because we're not in charge. And those people who are inflicting this aren't in charge either. They're given power for a while, but we can take it back.
It's the only profession, I think, on the planet where the servant gets to dictate to the boss, which is quite bizarre. And the Irish government last week, they awarded themselves another pay rise to become the highest paid politicians in Europe.
And they opened detention centres on this island, detention centres, without a murmur of protest. There's no opposition.
Well, there'll be plenty of room. There'll be plenty of room for them when the trials come around. Then they can go and stay there.
Yeah. I don't know. Hanging until that day.
Yeah, I don't know if the H blocks are still standing, but they could be put to very good use very soon.
We could get them opened again fairly soon.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Any final thoughts?
No, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. As I say, we say Chucky Arla here, which is our day will come, and I think that's relevant now in a completely different context.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Look at those young faces, and
I've heard that saying before because I lived in Ireland for 12 years, so I'm familiar with some of it. Yeah, and I've actually been in Derry. Actually, I went up to Derry for a wedding once. You've got nice castle walls there and stuff, haven't you?
Derry's beautiful, yeah. I am a bit biased, but it is a pretty city. Yeah, it's huge socioeconomic and political deprivation. That Derry has been neglected. It's right on the border with Donegal. But here we have, within an hour's drive, just Disneyland in every direction. It's beautiful, stunning, but a coast of the Antrim coast and the beaches of Donegal, and that's my promo for my hometown. I just love it.
The wedding I went to actually was between a Catholic and a Protestant, and they got married in Derry, and then we went on a little ferry thing across to Donegal for the reception.
Yeah, to Rathmullen, I'm sure. Yeah.
I'm not sure what it was.
Yeah, it's paradise.
Yeah. Cold, but paradise.
And as my father used to say, but he says, but if we had really sunny weather, there'd be 5-star hotels and 13-story apartment blocks everywhere along the coast, he says. So whenever the wind's blowing in the month of July and it's a bit chilly and it's too cold to go swimming, just look and say, that is what it is because of our climate, and then you get a nice day.
Yeah. Yep.
So looking forward to it, and I don't care personally if I never leave this country again, because like yourself, I'll be last man standing when they come with the rusty needles. Not happening.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of people here who say they won't get a shot, and the only shots will be going the other direction, and they won't be coming out of a needle.
Yeah.
So that might happen yet. Who knows? Anyway, okay, we'll finish on that, and pleasure talking to you.
Okay, Neil, it's been a pleasure talking to you. All the best, and keep in touch.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, maybe have you out again a couple of months or so.
Good stuff. Yeah, hopefully we'll be doing the victory. Yeah. Analysing how we beat them.
yeah, making up sentences for
all
these
the
people.
Best.
Yeah, okay, take care.
God bless.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you to Dr. Anne McCloskey. And as I mentioned at the start of the broadcast, I have a piece of, a few words from Alan Watt, all related to music, nothing to do with his real passion and his life's work, really. But there was another side of him, and that was the musical side. And as I say, he used to play a musical piece every Christmas Day for many years, and he gave it up through, as he mentions in the little clip, a lack of time, etc., and arthritis, etc. But he did pull the guitar out this last Christmas and put something together that he just made up in his head. And I think that's an appropriate thing to finish with. And Alan, if you're somewhere looking down or up or whatever from any perspective, I hope the rest of your existence is good. That's all I can say. I hope you're doing well. And we'll finish with that. Thank you very much. Thank you to Paula for putting up with the technical hitches and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And once more, thank you to Alan Watt for all his servitude to mankind.
So what I've done tonight too, and today, I think it's been 8 years or more since I opened the guitar case. I used to do occasional compositions. Even then, when I hadn't touched the guitar for years previously, and I would do one at Christmas time, and your fingers get worse and worse, and as you chop wood and all the rest of it. But I did pull the guitar a few days ago there to try to get it tuned. I actually bust one of my strings. Luckily, it bust just on the head. So I could tie it. Though it's on the classical guitar, tie it together, and it held, So I got up this morning, and I generally, even though I try and keep melodies out of my head and compositions out they come to me at times. Still, even though I said that there's no time for this kind of thing when we're going through this big war that I've been going through for a long, long time. So I put the guitar away to an extent, but I did pull it out this morning, and I rattled off in some form, some poor fashion, the beginnings, or at least the raw versions of some compositions that have been rattling around in my head, that when I get up, and I'll put them up tonight for you. And the first one is called The War. This is the war that is upon you and that you're going through right now. And the second one is Be Still and Know. And the third one is called Journey in the Land of Nod. Because sometimes you have to get your mind will take you into a little bit of escapism to keep you healthy once in a while. Gives you a little break. It's like soldiers on leave. You get a bit of leave inside your own skull. And your brain needs it sometimes. So the land of nod, that kind of never land. You're almost sleeping. And that's what that one is too. yeah, it's been 2012 since I picked the guitar up at all, you know. So I hope you enjoy it. As I say, it's the rough version played straight out from my head onto the guitar, and I might work on them later as well, and brush them all up and clean them all up and tidy them all up. A whole bunch I've got still to do from the previous years that I did it, because I used to do this for a living at one time. So anyway, take care of yourselves. Have a good Christmas, regardless. And don't just get terrified. Turn off that TV and regardless of what they got planned. You don't have to go along with all of it, believe you me. And there's more to this war than meets the eye. And this is the last thing you want to think about is the otherness of what's involved in all of this. They don't want you to think of that because you might get some power from the otherness, you know what I'm saying? And they know it too. They want you, if they can bring you into their battlefield, and their battlefield is the purely physical and monetary and material and financials, if they can bring you in on it, you see, and the scientific, like the Nietzschean battle. If God is dead, he says, then they can do what they want. All the things that was unthinkable, they can do all the things that are unthinkable. Well, you see, that was he said, if God was dead, eh? That's a big thing too, because a big idea, the thing that they're terrified of, the big idea, is that you might have the big idea too and revamp something or revitalize something that they wanted you to forget altogether. People fight for causes, big causes, and the bigger the cause, it comes from the bigger the meaning behind the cause, you see. It isn't just for us and liberty, no, it's for something much bigger. That's what they know, and they're terrified of. If people unite literally for something else that's bigger than themselves, that scares the people at the top. They on their battlefield, they can pull scientists out the hat anytime they want to. They'll try and bamboozle you with their nonsense. But when it comes into something else, personal experience, and something that exists here in the world and outside the world, that scares them. That's out of their realm, you see, and you're not supposed to think about it. So don't give up. And again, people can laugh at that too, because they've fallen for the plain battlefield of the physical. But they've never experienced things that are beyond themselves. I would love to be pure. I've always said this. I'd love to be purely rational at times, and I'd love to be purely logical at times. You see, things that are beyond this world are wrapped up in the logical world. You see, the material world. It'd be safer. And you say, well, but I can't because I'm not allowed to. I'm not allowed to, folks. I've said this so many times. Each time I try to, I get kind of cocky and say, I'm doing okay, or blah, 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 blah. This is many years ago, mind you. Then something would slap me right down. That shouldn't happen. 1,000 things that shouldn't happen would happen to me each time. Until you get the message. No, yes, this is not for you, you know. There's something else here. So I have no option but to accept that in the proof. And because of that proof, you can never talk to people who don't have that, who've never had experiences, and they don't have the proof of it. So I don't even bother mentioning it generally. It doesn't mean you can go crazy with it too and run amok into some la-la land. The fact is you have to use the knowledge wisely, even for yourself too. You know, you're living in a physical world, and you do have to deal with the physical world, no doubt about it, big time. But you get glimpses of the other in this world too, the other side of it all. And you also get it with relationships with people. Also the evil side with relationships with people. You get it all. This is the middle plane, as they call it, where everything happens. And you experience all the things. And people make their choices here. There's no doubt about that either. Eh? They really do make choices here. But do it all the time. So remember, folks, have a good Christmas, enjoy the music, and forgive the little rusty bits. You'll hear it. I feel it here and there. I'm sure half the time I was playing the strings, it wasn't my strings at all. That's my fingers are so brittle now. I think they were twanging, you see, and maybe adding to the harmony a little bit. So for myself, Alan Watt from Ontario, Canada. Have a Merry Christmas and good night.